Well, good evening, everyone. We're certainly grateful for your presence, thankful that you have chosen to come be with us. And I know and recognize that it's still a cold and dreary night out, and many people are trying to watch their health in regards to these colds and flu season, and hope that you'll be careful as well. But we are grateful for your presence, and we hope and pray that those who are battling those things will get over them as quickly as they possibly can. Cody, you did a good job, and I'm going to go ahead and jinx you right now. For the invitation song, I don't know how old I was, probably 18 or so, and I was really just kindly learning how to use a pitch pipe, and I led singing, and I can't remember if it was, seems like it was Flavel Nichols was holding a gospel meeting for us, and it was a good thing that there were a lot of responses because when I first started the song, it was about this much too high. But after the first stanza, Brother Nichols said he wanted to say something else, so I'm up there, trying to get it lower. And I'll kiss your foot. If it was this high the first time, it was that high on the second stanza. And I was thankful that somebody else responded, and he stopped again. I put that pitch pipe in my pocket, and I tried on my own. Third time, I got it low enough that I could sing. It's funny how songs will bring back memories, but I love that invitation song. And that's one of my favorite. Appreciate everything that all of you do. Appreciate you being here. I took a little bit of extra time this morning, so I'll give you some time back so you can average it out, and it'll work out about the same, because there's only 38 verses in Exodus 36, and there's not a whole lot of comments that I can make on these things. And really, what we're trying to do is to get this material into the mind of our young folks that are taking the test, preparing for Bible Bowl and Lads to Leaders, and that's what we're trying to do. So we're in Exodus 36. Verse 1 is still speaking about these gifted artisans. We have noticed them, I think, the last 2 Sundays in a row in regards to these men who are going to be in charge of the construction of the tabernacle. So in verse 1, and Bezalel and Aholiab, and every gifted artisan in whom the Lord has put wisdom and understanding to know how to do all manner of work for the service of the sanctuary shall do according to all that the Lord has commanded. And really, I think that verse probably should go back up in chapter 35 and probably should be the last verse in that section, because if you'll notice, in chapter 35, beginning in verse 30, that's what it's discussing and talking about. But these 2 gentlemen, Bezalel and Aholiab, are the 2 that are in charge. And they have obtained this. The Lord has imparted unto them the wisdom and the understanding to know how to do these things. It just strikes a curious nerve to me when I look at things and how they developed. And, we have gone down to Tannehill for years and years and years. And Charlie this year and I was down there, and we were walking and looking at the old iron works. And he said, well, now, how did they do that? And I thought, well, that's a good question. I said, it was something about they built a fire down here, and they poured the iron ore up in here, and it melted and burnt the iron ore out, and that's it. Well, if I was in charge in making the iron, I probably wouldn't do a good job. The Lord would have to impart some knowledge to me. And you look at history, and you see that there are particular times in history when certain things developed. And it makes me wonder, what hand did God play in regards to these things? Starting in verse 2, through verse 7, one of the most unusual passages in all of the Bible. One of the only times that you'll ever read where God said to his people to give, and they just gave and gave and gave to the point that God finally had to say, stop. That's enough. Don't bring any more. We've got all that we can use. I don't believe there's an eldership that has ever existed in the Lord's church that has had to tell its members, stop! don't bring any more. We don't need any more. We've got everything that we can possibly use. We seem to be on the other end of that spectrum of giving. But beginning in verse 2, Moses had called Beelzebul and Holiab and every gifted artisan in whose heart the Lord had put wisdom, everyone whose heart was stirred to come and do the work. And they received from Moses all the offerings which the children of Israel had brought for the work of the service of making the sanctuary. So they continued bringing to him free will offerings every morning. Then all the craftsmen who were doing all the work of the sanctuary came, each from the work he was doing, and they spoke to Moses, saying, the people bring much more than enough for the service of the work which the Lord commanded us to do. So Moses gave a commandment, and they caused it to be proclaimed throughout the camp, saying, let neither man nor woman do any more work for the offering of the sanctuary. And the people were restrained from bringing, for the material that they had was sufficient for all the work to be done. Indeed, too much. You need to underline those last three words because you're not going to find them. Not going to find them any more than I know of in God's inspired word. You've brought too much. Just don't bring any more. Well, that tells you something about the hearts of these individuals. First of all, it tells you about the ones whose hearts were stirred in verse 2. It didn't say everybody. Don't read something into the context. It didn't say every Israelite participated in this. It was everyone whose heart was stirred. You know, the same thing is true today. There are certain things that stir hearts of individuals. And you can get folks fired up, even maybe to the point where you say, I've got enough help. I don't need any more help. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. That's enough, that's enough. But right on the other hand, there are some that you couldn't poke with a hot poker and make them move because they're satisfied where they are and they're not willing, first of all, to give their hearts. And I think when you look at this situation, you need to make a comparison to the church at Corinth. First, they gave their hearts. Giving is easy if, first of all, you give your hearts. It's not hard, folks, for any one of these three redheads right down here on the front to come up to Pawpaw and say, Pawpaw, and I'm already opening my pocketbook. That's not hard. That's a joy. I look forward to that. Well, guess what? If we give our hearts to God and God says give, guess what we're going to do? We're going to start opening our hearts and giving to the very best of our ability. I don't know of a better lesson than that you could learn. Two great lessons here in these verses that we've been looking at over the last 2 or 3 weeks. One is to follow instructions explicitly, and the other is to give with a willing heart. Then in verse 8 and going down through verse 38, after we see Israel's generosity, the next thing is building the tabernacle. Now, again, you're about to hear and see a lot of particulars. God wants it this way. And no other way will satisfy him. You're going to look at it and he's going to say, make 10 curtains or 20 curtains and 15 sockets and bars and this and that, and it's this way and it's this way and it's this way. You can't improve on that. You can't have made 22 if he asked for 20 and say, well, I'm doing your will. I just wanted to put a little more in it. No. This is teaching us that the law is important. The letter of the law is to be observed, and that there's not to be any variance in regards to what the law says. Starting in verse 8. Then all the gifted artisans among them who worked on the tabernacle made 10 curtains, woven of fine linen and of blue, purple, and scarlet thread, with artistic designs of the cherubims. They made them. We don't have any pictures in regards to what the original tabernacle looked like. If you ever have the opportunity to go to polishing the pulpit, they now do a life-size their rendition of what they think the tabernacle must have looked like. And it's impressive. It's impressive. If you want to read these texts and then walk through that thing, they'll even give you a guided tour through it and explain all the particular parts and everything that goes into it. Well, it's an amazing thing. But now, what does that mean to us? Well, I think it means the very things I'm talking about, that the law is important and the law is not to be varied in any shape, form, or fashion. Verse 9, the length of each curtain was 28 cubits, and the width of each curtain 4 cubits. The curtains were all the same size. And he coupled 5 curtains to one another, and the other 5 curtains he coupled to one another. He made loops of blue yarn on the edge of the curtains, on the sleevage of one set. Likewise, he did on the outer edge of the other curtain of the second set. 50 loops he made on one curtain, and 50 loops he made on the edge of the curtain on the end of the second set. The loops held one curtain to another. And he made 50 clasps of gold and coupled the curtains to one another with the clasp, that it might be one tabernacle. He made curtains of goat's hair for the tent over the tabernacle. He made 11 curtains. The length of each curtain was 30 cubits. The width of each curtain 4 cubits. The 11 curtains were the same size. He coupled 5 curtains by themselves and 6 curtains by themselves. He made 50 loops on the edge of the curtain, that is the outermost in one set, and the 50 loops he made on the edge of the curtain of the second set. He also made 50 bronze clasps to couple the tent together, that it might be one. Then he made a covering for the tent of the ram skin, dyed red, and a covering of badger skins above that. For the tabernacle he made boards of acacia wood, standing upright. The length of each board was 10 cubits, the width of each board 1.5 cubits. Each board had 2 tenons for binding one to another. Thus he made for all the boards of the tabernacles. And he made boards for the tabernacle, 20 boards for the south side. 40 sockets of sivers he made to go under the 20 boards, 2 sockets under each of the boards, for it is 2 tenons. And for the other side of the tabernacle, the north side, he made 20 boards. And there 40 sockets of silver, 2 sockets under each of the board. For the west side of the tabernacle, he made 6 boards. He also made 2 boards for the 2 back corners of the tabernacle. And they were coupled at the bottom and coupled together at the top by one ring. Thus he made both of them for the 2 corners. So there were 8 boards and their sockets, 16 sockets of silver, 2 sockets under each one of the boards. He made bars of acacia wood, 5 for the boards on one side of the tabernacle, 5 bars for the board on the other side of the tabernacle, and 5 bars for the boards of the tabernacle on the far side westward. He made the middle bar to pass through the board from one end to the other. He overlaid the board with gold, made them rings of gold to be holders for the bars, and overlaid the bars with gold. He made a veil of blue, purple, and scarlet thread and fine woven linen. It was worked with an artistic design of cherubim. He made for it 4 pillars of acacia wood and overlaid them with gold with their hooks of gold, and he cast 4 sockets of silver for them. He also made a screen for the tabernacle door of blue, purple, and scarlet thread and fine woven linen made by a weaver, and its 5 pillars with their hooks, and he overlaid their capitals and their rings with gold, but their 5 sockets were bronze. Now, if I gave you a test real quick on how many bars and sockets and brass and gold and loops and hoops and curtains and what kind of skins were used and things of that nature, you see it's a little bit detailed, don't you? I think there's another reason why God probably did this, because He made us, and He made part of the population of this world male. How many of you pick up something down here at Lowe's and are going to put it together? Let's just say we're going to put together a barbecue grill. How many of you open the bag that has the instructions in it, and the first thing you do is throw the instructions away? That's what I thought. Me too. And how many of you end up at the end and you got a handful of pieces and you always say, I wonder where those go. I wonder if those things are important. I wonder if I need these things in that thing to make them work. It's God's plan. It's what God wanted. And therefore, He spelled it out so that there could be no misunderstandings in regards to what was to be done. Now, I believe when you go up here to Bezalel and Aholiab in verse 1, and we've already discussed them. You discussed them starting in verse 2 as well. But here are the guys who are in charge. And then it tells us in verse 2 that every one of these gifted artisans were individuals that had this wisdom from God. Now they're going to erect these things, and they're probably going to teach individuals how to do these things. The priesthood in particular is going to have to know how to deal with these things. They didn't just go in and grab the ark, the holy seat. They just didn't grab it up and say, okay, grab it and let's go. No, there were rings that were placed on those things. There were bars that were put through those. Particular individuals of the priesthood were the ones who would carry those things. It was spelled out to the every I was dotted, every T was crossed, every period was put there. Now, it usually makes me think in relationship to today. And today, so many people in our society think all of a sudden that under the patriarchal law, God had a law. And He expected people to follow the letter of the law. There's no doubt under the Mosaical law, which we're reading about right now, that God had a law. And not only did he have a law, he had something that was very meticulous. He had every point and everything in there covered. He did not leave it up to our discretion. And if you did not follow these things, you could be punished even by death. And then we come to the Christian age, and what most religious people say in the religious age today is, well, it's just not a law to be followed. Now, if you've studied history at all, how would you come to that conclusion? I believe you missed the boat. I know you missed the boat because Christ is our lawgiver. And he has told us what he wants, and he will not accept anything to be added to or taken away from. If you're here this evening and not a child of God, you can become one. How? Through your faith, repentance, confession, and baptism, you can become a child of God this evening. If you've done these things, but yet you've fallen short of the glory of God, you need to come back to your first love. We're going to sing this invitation song. We bid you come as together we stand and sing.